On behalf of the Security Industry Association, I'm Cameron Walker Miller with SIA Standards, and today we're talking about how security can benefit workplace efficiency and real estate optimization. We're joined today by Dan Cremins from Delta Electronics, who's also the chair of SIA's Built Environment Advisory Board. Um, we're also joined today by Bobby Louissaint, head of technical partnership and engagement at Meta, and also head or chair of SIA's End User Forum. Um, Thank you. So, Dan, let's get started. To you.
Yeah, thanks for Cameron and Bobby. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Everyone, I met Bobby at last IC West at one of the breakfast meetings, and Bobby told us, I thought, incredible story. I mean, what we're trying to do with the Built Environment Advisory Board is really explore how you can use video and access control for things outside security to really benefit, the entire built environment. And Bobby just had such a great story. I wanted to have this opportunity to share and go through some questions. So we're going to go through it. So, if you're not familiar, hopefully everyone's familiar with Meta, but Bobby, maybe you can kind of talk about, what problem Meta was trying to solve by deploying a solution for occupancy measurement.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate being able to share a bit about some of the things that we've been able to utilize with our current security infrastructure to help solve for some of the problems that the company was looking to solve for coming out of COVID. But the cusp of what we were looking to do really comes out of, hopefully if you haven't heard, we went through this year of efficiency model coming out of COVID. And after, the whole metaverse thing that went on with Wall Street. And part of that was really the company shifted, to really focus on products that had the highest impact. We focused on organizational flattening. And then also on top of that, business optimization, which is, I think where most of the work that our organization within global services, global system services and technology helped to support the business. And the focus really was really on understanding how our buildings were being utilized at the time in order for the company to come up with programming and planning to get people back into buildings appropriately, understand which buildings made sense to keep. Did we need to shift people around? Obviously, across the enterprise, we have multiple buildings around the world, multiple leases around the world. And going into COVID, we were growing tremendously in people and in space. So COVID really slowed us down. We went to pretty close to 100% work from home for everybody during COVID. And so coming out of it, obviously, I think a lot of companies dealt with, the problem of how do you get people back to work? How do you get people back into the office? People who are already at work, but how do you get people back into the office? And mainly, how do you do that in order to drive the type of engagement that you needed across your business to be creative, to get people to work together, to get alignment, those types of things. And so with those efforts, I think, the biggest advantage that I think our leadership recognized was coming out of the access control system, because we had started using the access control system to help support contact tracing efforts. And with those contact tracing efforts, we were able to notify people if, someone had COVID in a specific area that they had badged into. And, I think a lot of companies shifted to being able to do that. But we realized that also helped us understand at least how many people were in the building. And I think our leadership realized at that point that that was really important data in order for them to understand how people were also showing up once we did have efforts about getting back to office.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so mainly initially it was about how many people are actually showing up in the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, you see the news today, and ever since COVID, even though it's, a while since then this happens, I mean, a lot of organizations are still going through this process to figure out a return to work strategy because people just kind of content working from home,
Right.
remotely. So it's definitely a really big issue. Um, about how many buildings did you deploy this solution for? And I guess during the time you were doing, like how long did you measure occupancy for?
We're still measuring occupancy to this day, right? It's evolved tremendously beyond just occupancy, and now it's really about utilization for us. But it was pretty easy for us initially because we already had the systems in place, right? So we have access control across the whole enterprise. We roughly manage about 227 buildings across the infrastructure. And so with that, we already had access control deployed. So that was pretty easy to just latch onto that data and use it in different ways in order for us to understand how people are showing up or how many people are actually showing up in buildings. And with that data, I think I know for a fact that we were crucial in supporting leadership and making decisions on what buildings needed to stay open, where do we need to shift people in order to drive more engagement. And then as we started to really push to get people back in office, um, that data became pretty crucial to understand, what buildings need to stay open. On top of that, we have a pretty large camera infrastructure across the enterprise. And as we started to look beyond just occupancy, leadership wanted to understand, um, not just how many people showed up into a building, but where do they go? We have some pretty large buildings, especially here in North or up in Northern California. I'm actually in LA, but in Northern California at our Menlo Park campus, it's a pretty large campus. I mean, we have one building that is, I believe, 3.1 million square feet of office space. Technically, it's three buildings that are connected. It was spaces like that we needed to understand, not just how many people came in the building, but where do they go? And I have some information I can share here a little bit later, but at the same time, hopefully to get people to understand why we needed to know, where you go in the building. And just kind of high level for everyone, we provide a lot of amenities for our employees. And so we wanted to make sure that those amenities are being utilized, that they're appropriate, that they're in the right places, that they're properly staffed. And so that's where utilization came into play because we needed to know how many people actually eat in a cafeteria, how many people utilize any of the specialty amenities. We have coffee shops, we have a bike shop, we have an arcade, we have a pizza shop, those types of things. And so with that, that's where the evolution of just people counting evolved into more utilization data.
Great, great. I've heard so many other organizations talk about the use case exactly described for measuring occupancy, but most of them are using kind of a dedicated system. They're not using video or access control. I mean, how did you come to the conclusion to basically use video and access control instead of a more traditional occupancy type measurement solution?
Yeah, well, we started out, there had been an effort even prior to COVID to understand utilization. So we had been looking at and testing quite a few products that were specific to just utilization data or occupancy data. But the biggest complication that we found was that most of those systems were pretty proprietary. We had to use their sensor and we had to use their system. And so for an enterprise as large as ours, imagine the cost that it would have taken to have to deploy such a massive infrastructure to help manage that kind of stuff. So, we took a step back. We typically take a step back when people ask for things and we focus on the problem. And a lot of the times we make sure we scrub the existing core product portfolio that we have to see if it could help solve a problem. And sometimes it may not solve things 100%, but at the end of the day, we technically had products already hanging on walls and ceilings that could get to about 80-85%. And that was enough accuracy for our leadership to at least get started. So, we started looking obviously at the access control. We have turnstiles at every single entry point. We started looking at turnstiles and the data that we could pull out of the lanes. And then we started partnering with our camera provider on being able to utilize their onboard analytics for very basic analytics, people counting, trip line, motion sensing, those types of things to help to make the data more robust.
So was that really the biggest criteria, like for using the system you had, was the video analytics? I mean, you hear a lot about it, people talking about AI, people still trying to figure out, but I think in the physical security space, AI is already being implemented really well.
Yeah, and I'm going to back off of AI a little bit. I'm going to stick to analytics because that's actually what we're doing, right? We're using rules-based analytics, simplified analytics that we can load on the camera. And we were able to work out, normalizing the data coming out of those analytics to help us make our data more robust. And like I said, it's not 100%, but at the end of the day, it's pretty close, and we just kind of use math to get as close as possible. But yeah, I mean, we obviously have had analytics in the camera infrastructure in the industry for quite some time, right? And with those analytics, I think the biggest focus has always been for detection of some type of incident. We had to open our minds and think, well, can we use that differently? Can that help us understand how many people are actually in a space, when a space is actually being utilized, those types of things. And we started coming up with use cases to be able to understand if we can utilize the analytics. And then from there, we started testing them. And then we focused on like the highest performing analytics for us.
That's great. So you're basically taking these technologies used for security and using for a completely different application, which is fantastic. There had to be some concerns about privacy. So maybe can you talk about how you dealt with that internally, dealing with privacy concerns?
Yeah, we deal with privacy concerns first around here because we are Meta. So we're always very aware of everything that we do. We have a pretty close connection with our privacy team. And so as we came up with ideas and use cases, we had to spin those use cases up with our privacy team, and they gave us guidelines on what we could and couldn't do. And so mainly the focus that we had initially was in most of our common areas. So entry points, main corridors, our cafes, our micro kitchens, stuff like that. But when it came to actual work, what we call workplace, so anything with desk space that people are actually sitting down and working at, to this day, we're still kind of trying to figure out how to solve for those type of areas because of privacy. Our privacy team doesn't want us hanging cameras above people's desks when they're actually working. They don't want to be in a position where the cameras can actually see information on a laptop or on a phone or anything like that. So when it comes to workspace itself, we're pretty sensitive to that. We're actually looking at other technologies outside of just cameras.
Great, great. So in deploying this system, I imagine you had to work with other departments outside of security. Like, can you talk about the process of how you engaged with them and got their buy-in?
Yeah, so I mean, I think surprisingly for us in this regard, it was probably easier than normal, I want to say, mainly because we already had everything hanging on the wall. So the biggest complication was really bringing in privacy and legal and understanding, what were the guardrails that we had to put up in order to make sure that we weren't crossing a line that was going to get us in any trouble with any of the work that we were doing. And then also understanding, where can we utilize existing camera infrastructure, and then where can we also add existing camera infrastructure. But outside of that, I mean, it made it a lot easier with all of our stakeholders because we were already using approved devices that we've been using for years. And so when it comes to network security concerns or infrastructure concerns, anything like that, where we would partner with our IT or we would partner with our NetSec teams, which is usually the most complicated part, right? Like getting a new system on our infrastructure typically takes probably a year. I'll just be honest. Just to vet all of the parts and pieces and what we call hardware discovery accomplished. So with that, it made it all, that was another reason why utilizing the existing systems that we already had made it a lot easier for us to move fast on this. So number one, it was cost. Number two, infrastructure was already there. So we're not going to have to pull new wire. We're not going to have to need new IP addresses. We didn't need to do anything like that. We weren't going to have a very lengthy proof of concept format because we were also using existing stuff. And basically we are already using trusted products that already run on our infrastructure. So it wasn't that complicated for this scenario.
Great, great. So you got these systems deployed, access control, video, you're collecting all this occupancy data. So then what are you doing with it? So how do you present this and kind of summarize it to draw conclusions from? You bring it into a dashboard, or can you
Yeah.
describe that process?
Yeah, so basically, we work with the product manufacturers to help figure out how do we normalize that data, and we pull that data into a data lake. And then from there, we have a data analytics team that will take that data and contextualize it in ways where we can visualize it for leadership. So when you say, and actually I probably could have expanded on your earlier question about stakeholders, right? So the flip side of the stakeholders were the end users of the actual data, right? So partnering with them on specific use cases for the type of data they want to see, so we can understand how to build the visualizations that they needed. And then on top of that, being focused on kind of the highest priority criteria and requests that needed to be accomplished as well with stakeholders. So as you can imagine, here at Meta with, I don't know, I think we're somewhere up to 69,000 employees or something like that. I don't know how many departments, probably 69,000 departments, right? That's what it feels like sometimes. We had to prioritize requests because once the data
Right.
started coming out and these people started understanding how we could use this data, obviously we had other departments and other people trying to pull this data as well. And that's where working with privacy and legal, there were very strict guidelines on who could actually see the data. I would say mainly it's senior leadership. So everyone from like a senior vice president to our C-level teams have, access to this data on a regular basis. Anyone else has to actually go through a process of approval for us to even start looking at developing any type of visualizations for them.
Great, great. So following the analysis, I understand you're still doing it, but can you share like some of the things that you're doing to optimize Meta's business based on the data you're collecting?
Yeah, I mean, so I think we've helped, and well, I keep saying I think, I know we've helped, leadership understand what buildings need to be probably shut down or subleased. Coming out of COVID, I'm sure the world has seen that, we had leases for buildings that we thought we were going to move into, that based off of this data, we understood that we couldn't move into those buildings. So either we had to give up the lease or sublease into those buildings. When it comes to, what we call workplace, which is our office space, so not data centers, but office space, we slowed down significantly based off of this data as well. And I think the data really helped us understand how do we program to get people back to office? Because we were also in a we were in a period of time after COVID, I want to say almost a year and a half, 2 years, where we were hybrid. And it was almost like you could just show up whenever you wanted. We scrubbed that data. When we allow people to show up whenever they want, how many people actually show up, right? And it probably didn't meet the expectations of leadership. And so at some point last year, the company decided that, we had a return to office effort. And so all of this data that we had been collecting and utilizing and visualizing for leadership helped them put together a whole program on return to office. And we continue to monitor that data as well. On top of that, understanding, if we had a building that had 5 coffee shops in it, we utilize this data to understand, how many people actually go to those coffee shops, how many people actually walk in those directions, walk into the coffee shop. And at the end of the day, do we need 5? Maybe we only need 3, right? So we've been able to help support things like that. And then on top of that, I do have a picture here for people to understand. We're a very conference room centric organization. So, open space type workplaces, but at the same time surrounded by conference rooms that people can use, anything from 1 to 2 man conference rooms or 1 to 2 person conference rooms up to anywhere of 12, 15, 20 people conference rooms scattered throughout all of our campuses. And most of us use conference rooms to have meetings when we're there. We do a lot of VCs like this. And so, so with that, you know, utilization of the conference rooms became very important as well, right? So understanding, you know, if someone booked a 12-person conference room, but only 2 people went in that room,
Right.
you know, having the ability to, number one, understand that, and then being able to, you know, send them an alert saying, hey, you're in a bigger conference room than you need. We're going to go ahead and close this conference room and open it up for someone else and move you into another conference room. So things like that as well are things that we're working on today. And, you know, I'd say to expand further on utilization for us and understanding the data, you know, one of the things we also support for our cafe teams is, or our culinary teams, is how long are people standing in line to get food? And so hopefully, if not, I think I have a picture of this too. In our cafeterias, you know, everyone eats for free, right? Well, we don't want people standing in line for 15 minutes to get their food. And so basically we want to try to get that time minimized as much as possible, because the whole idea is to get them back to work, right? So if they're standing in line forever, that's pretty much a problem for us. So we support the culinary team in understanding kind of the queue times of the cafeteria line, so that way they can shift the workforce appropriately, depending on how many people have actually shown up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds like a great facility. You said you have some images you can share with us?
Yeah, I do actually. If you want me to go ahead, and maybe we could still keep talking and I could share some
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, probably next question is, and this is kind of the magic question, like it sounds like this was a tremendous effort and project, involved a lot of people. There was a budget. I mean, Meta invested in this. So the question that, often gets asked a lot of times is, was there an ROI? I mean, so if you went to Meta's CFO and asked them about this project, do you think that there was a good return on investment for this?
It was absolutely a great return on investment. We proved significant cost savings in comparison to some of the other products that we had been looking at prior to COVID. Prior to COVID, to cover spaces like this across our enterprise was going to be somewhere up of 20 to $25 million to deploy some type of occupancy utilization sensor system across the enterprise. And then it would have been singular. It would have been one system. It wouldn't have been like a multitude of systems that we're looking at utilizing today with our internal infrastructure. Here's a picture of like the conference room scenario that I'm talking about. And so the ROI was immediate. Like, we didn't spend much money. And once, it was more probably people time is what I want to say, was the cost that we incurred in getting the development done on some of the stuff we already had. So mainly like the testing, stuff like that is where the costs really were initially. And then based off of the type of data that we were able to provide to leadership, they wanted more. So we ended up, being able to capture more budget to cover additional spaces that leadership wanted to understand. And we continue to do that today. So now the funding for this is pretty significant. And at the same time, it has allowed for us to kind of get a dual purpose system in place. One side is absolutely we're supporting, our global security team and providing more tools for them out in our buildings for them to utilize when needed. But then at the same time, we could also leverage this infrastructure to help support business insights for leadership. And this is an example of my micro kitchen. Every single one of our buildings has a micro kitchen like this. And as you can see, we have product on the right, coffee machines in the back. There's fruit, there's drinks, there's usually, this one doesn't show it, but usually there's a refrigerator with a bunch of drinks in it. And just as an example for everyone, we are now looking at how can we use some analytics. And this is where AI is coming into play a little bit for us. We're testing these types of things out. And think Amazon Go store, right? Not that we care who's coming to get something, but as you can see in these racks over here, right, we have to stock that stuff. And so understanding when some of these products are running out and being able to alert the teams, the culinary team, that this micro kitchen needs to be refreshed is a pretty big deal right now, because today we do it, 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 8 p.m. type scenario. And we do it across all the micro kitchens. Well, what if a micro kitchen has been underutilized and doesn't need to be restocked, right? And so we're looking at being able to use utilization efforts in a combination of analytics and AI to help us understand and alert our culinary team that micro kitchen 1, 2, 3 needs to be refreshed. You need to send someone over there to refresh the micro kitchen. Micro kitchen 4, 5, 6 hasn't been used. No need to go refresh that micro kitchen.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you for sharing these pictures. Looks like a great place to work, and getting hungry just looking at the kitchen there.
It's all right.
Um, yeah, so I mean, you got the system deployed. You talked about some things you're doing. What are you going to do next with this? I mean, I kind of relate to this as like a great example of a smart building. You're taking the data from, one part of a system, using it to solve different use cases. I mean, think about occupancy. A lot of times in a smart building, you use occupancy like to drive HVAC and lighting to save on energy. Are you exploring things like that, or you know, what are you
Yeah,
looking to
absolutely.
do with it next?
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, this was probably entry point mainly because of return to office efforts, like I said earlier, but now based off of what we've been able to do, there is an expansion of use case into this utilization effort and its overall utilization. It's moved beyond where do people show up, those types of things, but it's also how do we incorporate existing systems throughout the building to help one contextualize that building, contextualize the data in that building, and then also get to more of a smart building type scenario where we can leverage our existing building management system, fire alarm system, lighting systems, security systems, anything for the building environment to help us understand how the building is being utilized, and then also understand how to better optimize all of the utility that's being used in those spaces. I mean, it's things that we're talking about today, and don't get me fired for saying it, but I don't know if I can go. If you could see here, we're starting to hang cameras above elevators so we can understand where people are going. How many people, if we had 100 people come into the building, how many people went to the first floor? How many people went to the second floor? How many people went to the third floor? Those types of things. We're also looking at exploring today, just putting a basic wireless door contact on a bathroom door, right? Not because we want to track people going in the bathroom, but we want to understand how do we refresh the bathroom. Kind of the same scenario as the micro kitchen. Obviously, it's kind of sketchy if we're going to hang a camera in front of a bathroom door, so we had to figure out a different way of doing it. We're exploring just using a regular wireless door contact to understand how many times the door has been opened. And then from there, just some basic math and formulas to understand when to alert our janitorial team that they probably need to go refresh that bathroom. It's the same thing as the micro kitchen scenario. Today, they refresh the bathroom at 6 a.m., 10 a.m., 2 p.m., 4 p.m., something like that, right? Versus if the bathroom hasn't been used all day, we know we don't need to refresh it, right? If the bathroom has been overly used by 9 a.m., we can alert someone to go refresh that bathroom because it's probably got a toilet paper or it's probably out of paper towels, whatever it is. We're exploring sensors to put on trash cans. And so that way we know when we need to empty the trash. Temperature sensors for our culinary teams. All of these things we're looking at. And the complication of it all is really just trying not to bring something new into our environment because we already have a bunch of tools that we're trying to contextualize and we're trying to get them to integrate. So if we introduce another platform or another system, and that's just another platform and system that we got to figure out, how do we integrate all this data and contextualize all this data so we can understand and visualize it and utilize that data for the outcomes that we want. So we're pretty I want to say allergic to looking at something new. We tend to
Right.
look at what we got in our industry today that already works with our access control system, that already works with our video system, that already works with our cameras, obviously. And we explore all of those options first. They may seem basic, but basic typically is also easier to manage, is what we found. as well. We try not to overcomplicate things, because when you look at the complexity of all of the platforms that we manage, it's already complex. So the easiest things that we can put in is probably the lowest hanging fruit for us. And then on top of that, we're talking about a basic door contact. It's not going to cost $1 million, right? So, and again, it's standard products that we already use. So there's no going through hardware discovery, POCs, pilots, trying to understand how these devices are going to work and perform. We already have that data. We know if we stick a wireless door contact on the bathroom door, we know we can connect it to our access control. We know we can pull that data. We know we can push that data into the lake. And when the team needs to pull it, they can grab it and they can understand now how all the bathrooms are being used.
Yeah, that is awesome, Bobby. Thank you so much for going to such level of detail on practical use cases. I think any organization could benefit from. Maybe I'll just ask you, one last question. I mean, I think so many organizations are faced with the same challenge that you guys are addressing. I mean, what tips would you give them? I mean, based on what you've done here. I mean, like, how would you get started with this?
I think kind of like your earlier question is identify all your stakeholders, right? Number one. So you can understand, because if you're only talking to one department or one team, or you yourself are trying to do this, you don't understand like what the overall business needs are, right? So really getting all the stakeholders together that are appropriate to understand the business needs. I think what we learned as well is building programming around it as well, so you can have guardrails on what it is that you're actually going to do, and you can focus. Because once you start doing it, then everybody wants to do it and jump in, right? Well, if you already have a program and a team and a process that you've developed in doing this, I find that has helped to minimize the amount of thrash that actually happens from trying to accommodate everyone, because you can't. You cannot accommodate everyone. You need to focus.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think it's important that you start small. So we took small steps. We started with just the access control. We expanded on the access control by utilizing the turnstiles. It was kind of one thing at a time. And then, the data became, more valuable and more valuable as we started to add additional sensor data into the overall program. But having the partners, at the table initially helped us establish like priority use cases that we wanted to build, right? So that way we weren't trying to build for 20 different things. We were going to build for 2 or 3. And everyone was understanding of that, right? And we knew that over time we would get to the 20, but today we need to start with 2 or 3, maybe even just 1, right? And so we have a model around here that slow is fast, right? Slow everyone down so you can get all the data that you need together, get all your stakeholders that you need together, and then most importantly, make sure that those stakeholders include your privacy and legal team right up front. If you're looking at deploying new systems, make sure that your network security team and your network teams or your IT teams are there right up front. So that way don't go, and please don't beat me up for saying this, but don't go to ISC West and go to GSX and go find something and then bring it into your infrastructure expecting everyone to buy off on it. Don't do that. That absolutely does not work for us. We tend to start with the problem, dissect the problem, make sure we know how to program around the problem. We explored all of our existing systems first to see if it would solve for the problem. And then from there, we started looking out on the street. I mean, we still to this day are exploring. We really just haven't found anything that moves the needle far enough for us to really bring in-house to replace what we're doing today. We have not. Technically, the existing systems that we have capabilities outside of their normal capabilities to help us at least collect the data, right? So whether it's a BMS system, whether it's an access control system, or whether it's a video system. The other thing too is just exploring video. I mean, there's a lot of context just in a video shot, right? So if you're not just looking for the bad guy, you can get a lot of information from your video just by itself that has nothing to do with security. So opening up our minds and trying to understand, what kind of data do we actually get out of our systems is really, really important. And how can you use that in a different way, right? I think the hard part for us is that because it's security, we really only look at that data when it's a problem. We don't look at it every single day, right? But if you looked at it every single day, it tells a story. It tells a story of how your building is working. It tells a story of how many people came in the building. It tells a story of, what does the environment actually look like? How many people are in the environment? Our systems have a lot of different data if we capture that data and use it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Bobby. That was just an awesome way to end this. Um, Cameron, do we have anything, comments, questions from anyone attending that we want to go through now?
The questions I think were answered. There was one question about let me find it. The different technologies to help solve space utilization challenges in the future, but I think you just described it there. Maybe is there a software as a service solution that you think would be something to kind of distill those data lakes better?
I hope so. I talked to a lot of manufacturers today. And I tell probably every single one of them the opportunity because we don't see a platform that can contextualize sensor data across not just security technologies, but building technologies. If there was a platform that could take our data, like get away from security, but take the data and contextualize that data, I think there's a huge advantage for that in the future for those types of companies. And there's security industry companies today that have the potential of being able to do that if they could actually like think a little bit differently. And open architecture is always a big problem in our industry. A lot of proprietary systems out there. People don't want to talk to each other. But from a platform standpoint, we have not been able to find anything that really moves the needle for us. So, we've had to build kind of our own to help manage all of this. We don't want to do that. I don't know if there's any manufacturers on this call. I hope there is. We don't want to. I know we're Meta and we have a billion engineers, but they're worried about Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook and all the new Meta Gen stuff that's going on and Llama and like all of that. They don't care about what we're doing, right? So, even though we've been able to get some stuff across the line, the hope is that someone in the industry really takes a look at this and understands that, we don't want to just buy your sensor. We want to connect everything else to your platform as well. And that has really been the biggest complication. If I had anything to say about the future of things, I do think that someone is going to figure this out. I think it'll be connected to AI, which is scary. I mean, when I say scary, I mean scary in a good way. I'm not talking in a bad way at all. Um, if we're able to utilize AI, we have so much data that we look at. Like, I'm just going to call out like forced doors. Like forced door alarms alone are probably the highest amount of data that we get out of the access control platforms every single day. I believe that products like AI are going to help to really contextualize that signal and minimize the amount of forced doors that are actually being pushed to the screen. So that way operators are seeing real forced doors. That capability actually is here now. And so when you think about being able to do things like that just for security, I mean, what could we be doing for facilities? What could we be doing for janitorial services, culinary people, retail business? When you talk about latching, a brain to all the sensor data that we actually have on a daily basis, it's just too much information for us to look at as humans. So if we were able to use an AI assistant to help contextualize that data and push real-time data that we want to see to the screen, I think that change is extremely significant and important for us. I think it helps our business. It helps position us as security practitioners, support our leadership with business intelligence. So not just security intelligence, but business intelligence. And I don't think we're too far away. I think we're probably a year, 2 years away from being able to have something hit the street that makes it happen.
So one other question: 1 year, 2 years, in 10 years, where do you see Meta security program advancing in long-term future?
Meta security program
Or
or
you can make it general. The question is about Meta, but you can make it more general than that.
Well, I mean, when I think about Meta, obviously we're Meta, we're big in AR, VR. I'm a big fan of AR, VR. I think augmented reality supports our industry in a significant way. I think we're probably one of the biggest industries to take advantage of augmented reality, plus all the systems we use. Mainly because if we're able to communicate, to our operators that are out in our buildings, that are responding to incidents, and being able to not only see real-time information, but feed them real-time into information to a glass, right? So they're walking around with some type of glass headset with a camera on it. Obviously Meta has the Ray-Ban glasses. The lens doesn't have a screen in it yet, but I play with all these things and I play in VR all the time. And when I think about all these things, I think about a lot of virtualization of a lot of the programs that we run. And then you marry those things with AI, Gen AI. I think 10 years from now, we become not just proactive, but I think we become more visionary on where we need to set, security protocols, SOPs based off of not just your environment, but what's going on in the world, and position your security business in a more efficient manner, in a more optimized manner. And I think security becomes, I don't even know if it'll be security anymore. I think Minority Report actually is what I think.